Test, test, mic check. Mic check, 1, 2. Check, check, mic test.
Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting. Before I start, I'd like to welcome someone here. Assemblymember Amy Poland is here. She is the chairperson of the Committee on Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions. Assemblymember is in the back, and I want to welcome her. She has oversight in her committee and her responsibilities over the MTA. So we welcome her here today and look forward to hearing from her. With that, let's move forward with the number of public speakers we have. I understand we have 21 today. Is that true? Where's Steve?
I think it's, I'm right here, Mr. Chairman. I think it's 20.
Okay.
Before we begin, I would like to again remind our speakers that we have to limit comments to 2 minutes each. For your guidance and convenience, we have a new countdown clock up front, in addition to the machine on the podium. It'll beep when you've spoken for 90 seconds, and it's a reminder that you should wrap up with your last 30 seconds. We do this so that we have time to hear all of our speakers and so that we can treat all of our speakers equitably. We also remind you that your comments should be limited only to items on the agenda for today's board meeting. If you require a microphone be brought to you, signal one of our staff when you're called. And we ask all of our speakers to observe rules of politeness and avoid comments to individual board members or disparaging remarks to or about anyone. Thank you. Our first speaker is Chris Pangilinan, to be followed by Yannick Benjamin and then Mary Kessinger. Mr. Pangilinan. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Chris Pangilinan. Last month, you approved a funding package for the Enhanced Station Initiative, a $1 billion top-to-bottom station renovation program that unfortunately leaves people with disabilities, parents with strollers, injured veterans, and many others who need elevators out in the cold. By funding this package, each of you who voted yes made a conscious or uninformed decision to continue the travel ban for people with disabilities along Central Park West. You have also decided to maintain this disability travel ban in Bay Ridge, Park Slope, Sunset Park, and Astoria. When questioned about these decisions, the chairman's response is that elevators are simply not possible at every station. But I must ask you and the board, then, how could you possibly know this as a fact? It is frustrating to hear you all fall back on that tired answer of not possible when you have not even asked staff to study the issue, coupled with the fact that you will be building a new staircase at 30th Avenue, but not an elevator. And if in some places there are more complex engineering issues, you have hundreds of inaccessible stations where this is not the case that you are making zero progress on. Our fear is that 30 years after the ADA, you will reach the key station milestone in 2020 and stop at 25% accessibility, while your peers in Chicago and in Boston are striving for 100%. As individuals, I know that you empathize and care about what we endure living in such an inaccessible city.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr.
However,
Pangilinan.
Your position on this issue as MTA leaders is an affront to the civil rights of your fellow New Yorkers and an abdication of your civic responsibility on the MTA board. Take this opportunity now, though, to make history and do what is right. No more ESI, Enhanced Station Initiative, without elevators. Hold the MTA to a higher standard and make a commitment to 100% subway accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pangilinan. Yannick Benjamin, then Mary Kessinger, then Omar Vera. Morning, Mr. Benjamin.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Yannick Benjamin. I am a longtime, born and raised here in New York City, and I currently live in the Bronx. And I have to say that overall, I find it very disappointing generally with the lack of transparency that there is in the MTA. For example, I live on 61st, and I take that train, the D&D4, regularly. Regularly, that train, the elevator breaks down. I go on the website, and it's sometimes not reported. The common answer that I always get when I go up to the person working in the booth, it's not my job. And I always find that appalling. And this is something that's continuously happening. And the first thing that I'd like to see is a cultural change of empathy for people living with disabilities, taking responsibility and taking accountability, because that's the only way change will happen. I understand that we're an old world city in a new world country where structurally things are very difficult to make change. But I believe that we can figure it out together if we can think a little bit outside the box and we can get rid of some of the bureaucracy that exists. New York City is a great city, but it is not the greatest city in the world currently right now. To be the greatest city in the world, we have to be inclusive. And right now, inclusion with people with disabilities does not exist within the MTA. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Mary Kessinger, then Omar Vera, then Geis Norbert. I hope I pronounced his first name correctly.
Hi, I'm Mary Kessinger, and I'm here today to talk about the buses. And the simple fact is that we need more of them, because very often I wait for the bus, and it comes by, and it says, not in service. So I wait another 20 minutes, another bus comes by, also not in service. When the third bus comes by, it is chock full of people and passengers. So the simple answer to this problem is that we need more buses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Omar Vera, then Geis Norbert, then Arthur Piccolo. Good morning, Mr. Vera.
Good morning. MTA board, welcome to the full board meeting of the last 2 months of 2017. So the previous three speakers make very good points, and that is that the New York City subway system needs to be more accessible, and we can do it, and that should be something amended to the governor's station enhancement plan, the stations here, because that was one of the biggest criticisms of the renovation of the 4th Avenue line, our stations at Prospect, 53rd, and Bay Ridge Avenue. Is that there's lack of accessibility, like elevators or at least a ramp or something, but. Duly noted, and I support your cause. So yes, anyway, so reiterating from Monday, I reiterate basically what I said in all of the respective committee meetings, as well as to the big prize, which is to bring back the B-71 bus that was eliminated back in 2010. A year that will forever basically be in infamy, because all the service cuts could have been avoided. They could have been avoided, But as my one of my high school teachers used to say, better late than never. So, and finally, of course, I'm in support of the procurements here. But like I said, we should always strive to do better. And of course, when we work as a team, we are sure to achieve all our goals.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Vera.
All right, thank you. And we will make things, and we should make things better for the world as a whole. Thank you, and see you around in December.
See you around. Geis Norbert, Arthur Piccolo, Harold Schroer. Mr. Norbert, good morning.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Norbert Geis. I'm a board member of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions, CURES, and the Glendale Property Owners Association. The MTA LIRR has promised our communities the cleanest Tier 4 locomotives in our community. I ask that you keep your promise by approving procurement of Tier 4 switch-duty locomotives. Your freight locomotives operate in our neighborhoods 24/7, 365 days a year. So your decision will have a long-term impact on the health of our families. You have to ask yourselves why the purchase of Tier 4 line haul locomotives is being advanced for the first time ever. This green locomotive procurement, which started in 2012, was always for 2,000 horsepower switch-duty locomotives. Even in the 1960s, when the LIRR hauled 4 times as much freight as the New York and Atlantic Railway hauls presently, you used switchers. The system hasn't changed. The grades haven't changed. An advanced 1,500 horsepower Tier 4 switch-duty locomotive can go over 65 miles an hour, and a top speed for freight locomotives on your tracks is presently 45 miles an hour. Is there a preferred manufacturer who only has a line haul locomotive to sell you? I most respectfully ask this board not to approve any RFP that is written to make an award to a preferred manufacturer like the last procurement did. This board needs to know that STV, your consultant for this procurement, prepared your RFP before collecting.
I have to ask you to wrap up, Mr. Geese.
And railroads, and doing the calculations that determine what brake horsepower and tractive loads the LIR and the New York Atlantic Railway actually need. So if you are asked to approve STV's RFP today and include locomotives above 2,300 horsepower, which are line haul locomotives that the LIRR and the New York Atlantic has never used, I implore you to tell STV to go back and finish the job you paid them to do before asking you to okay to buy locomotives. Thank you.
On the button. I apologize for renaming you, Mr. Geese. Arthur Piccolo.
My comments fit clearly within the context of the previous speakers. I left each of you a two-page memo, which amounts to a revolutionary document, which shouldn't be. A revolutionary idea, which should not be, that this board should have a 10-year plan to make the New York City transit system the best in the world. I have never, ever, and I don't think anyone else has ever heard an MTA chairman or board say that our goal is to absolutely, very specifically, create the best transit system on earth. If you had a 10-year plan with very specific goals, not the platitudes we see in MTA documents, there is no reason why 10 years from now we could not have the best transit system in the world. I use 3 examples, and there could be it's a much longer list in my memo. One is a sophisticated new switching system that would allow for incredible new flexibility in existing lines. A second one is Mayor de Blasio's trolley folly in Brooklyn. We're in an age of automated vehicles, especially on controlled routes. 10 years from now, we could have the most sophisticated transit system, surface transit system possible. Trolleys are old technology. Putting wires above and tracks and spending billions of dollars shouldn't even be considered. The other proposal, the board is going to use one line, the L line, is going to test in one station, putting up doors on platforms to prevent people from falling onto tracks or from being pushed onto tracks. That exists in systems all over the world. We
30
should
seconds,
have a plan
Mr. Piccolo.
to do that in all the stations within 10 years. It's a system that could pay for itself. 10 years ago, a company came to the MTA, said they would put these doors in all the stations in the system in return for the advertising revenue on the panels. This system can pay for itself, and you should have a 10-year plan, and it's time to have it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Harold Schroer, Christopher Gorman, Zachary Accordo. Mr. Schroer, good morning.
Good morning. My name is H.P. Schroer. I'm a veteran of World War II, and I live in Manhattan. In spite of the turmoil existing in America, we have always been a giving society. In times of need, have done the right thing. Whether it took the form of service to country, as our veterans have done, or giving a helping hand to those in distress. As we get older, we recognize that time becomes an ever-precious commodity. And so when I was told at the committee meeting on last Monday, a veteran's discount would not be considered by the board till after the first of the year, I was shocked. And at my age, that's not a good thing. I firmly believe doing the right thing should be determined by one's conscience rather than time. A veteran doesn't say, let's wait 90 days before considering action. And while they have been an effective fighting force when protecting the country, they are the silent minority when fighting for their own rights. As a group, it is a well-known fact most veterans do not freely express their anxieties and are stoic in dealing with them.
30 seconds, Mr. Schroer.
As evidenced by the fact that 24 of us commit suicide every day. And so I respectfully ask this board, examine your own conscience. Put this proposal on your agenda now. Don't procrastinate. Pass the veterans discount quickly and not allow it to become subject to partisan politics. Demonstrate to America you are the first to recognize, this injustice and do something about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Christopher Gorman, then Zach Acquarty, and then Timothy Lunsford Stevens.
Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
talking on behalf of HP as well on the veterans discount. There's 2 cities in this country already doing it, one in California and one in Las Vegas, giving a discount to veterans, just showing their ID card or D2 of 14. The mechanism is in place in New York City to do this, and we're not doing it. I'm sorry. I always do that. I apologize. We're looking at, there's 2 cities who are doing this already. They have a discount for all veterans. There's ways of doing it. Getting a D2 14 sent it to the state, they process it that way, or using your ID card you get from the VA. Furthermore, New York City has in CUNY alone, there's 3,000 students who are veterans. They don't stay in New York. There's no buy-in from the state to our veterans. They come for the school because they're getting a higher rate of BAH, the housing allowance, and they leave because they don't feel comfortable in the city. One of the ways we can do this is by giving them the opportunity to travel for a discount. The more veterans stay here, the better it is for New York City. If we do this, I can work with the other CUNY directors and make sure we have this going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Zachary Acquarty, Timothy Lunsford Stevens, and then Jim Farrat.
Morning. I'm Zach Acquarty from Transit Center. I was in Chicago recently where I got to tour a recently opened and beautifully accessible downtown L station. In making their public transportation system accessible to all, the Chicago Transit Authority is working hard to solve a problem that simply demands solving. The CTA leadership has made a choice to honor their riders by committing to retrofit a century-old heavy rail system with elevator access. Aren't New Yorkers also capable of solving such hard problems? I've been thinking about this a lot these last couple of weeks because almost immediately upon arriving at the station platform, our tour guide, a CTA employee, said something that made me wince. Of course, as part of this project, we installed new elevators at both ends of the station to provide ADA access. I immediately looked across the tour group to a colleague, and the guide took notice as we mouthed silently to each other, "Of course." After our guide finished his remarks, I explained to him why my colleague and I had taken note of his comment. I said that in New York, we have a $1 billion series of primarily aesthetic station overhauls that ignore ADA access entirely. His response was to laugh and to say, "I must be joking." I assured him that I was unfortunately not, and he shook his head in disbelief. I was embarrassed. So are other New Yorkers when they hear about the MTA's Enhanced Station Initiative, your initiative, Governor Cuomo's initiative. You ought to be embarrassed too for
You have 30
overseeing
seconds,
implementation
sir.
absent a firm commitment to install new ADA accessible elevators as part of these plans. It's time to start fixing this. It's time to hold your agency accountable by recognizing that Governor Cuomo's Enhanced Station Initiative is an ill-conceived and disrespectful use of taxpayer dollars. Thank you for your time, and please take a few moments during your meeting today to agree that the MTA needs a plan for the fully accessible system that all New Yorkers deserve and which we will all one day need.
Thank you, Mr. Acquarty. Timothy Lunsford Stevens, Jim Farrat, and then Dustin Jones.
Thank you, Board, for allowing me to speak. I'm Timothy Lunsford Stevens, and I'm one of those that has invisible disabilities. Right now, my legs are degenerating in my bones, and I'm having problems on the MTA buses as well as the elevators. Just yesterday, I went to the doctor to have some injections, and I got off at 14th Street, and you had a sign on the elevator. I'm deaf, but you had a sign that said, "Elevator out," and you put it to be fixed by Sunday. And that was not listed on the MTA when I went. I had to go back to 7th Avenue, take an elevator out, and get on a bus and take a bus over to Union Square. That cost me extra money. Okay, there is no way that you allow disabled people who have these problems with accessibility, for example, going down Broadway to the Oculus. You don't have elevators at the stop for the Oculus. You have elevators at Cortlandt and Battery. A person in a wheelchair or someone like me has to go to one of those stations, go to the street, and then wheelchair up to the Oculus or walk up to the Oculus and take the Westfield Properties elevators to go to the shopping mall. at the Oculus.
You have 30 more seconds, Mr.
And
Lunsford.
what I don't understand is why you don't have a committee that works on disability. And if you do, you have not made that public. And what I don't understand is when I read your minutes, last month you had nobody speak about disability, and you yourself did not put any information about disability in the book. You need to make it aware now that you're working on the disability problems with the MTA and have a 10-year plan to install elevators where you can.
Thank you very much. Jim Forat, Dustin Jones, and then Nancy Montgomery.
Good morning. My name is Jim Forat. I'm 76 years old, and I want to make all the subways accessible to all people. It is easy to understand the visible disability of people that you see right here in this room, but those are not the only people that need to have accessibility. Pregnant women, old people, anyone with a mobility issue, bike riders, delivery people. You really need to put your priorities back in order. I like to have art in subways, and I feel safer with the Wi-Fi. But if I can't get into a subway, or my friends cannot get into a subway, those amenities become secondary. I'm a taxpayer. Most of us have worked all of our lives. This is public transportation, and you have an obligation and a responsibility to represent us. A couple of suggestions. Corporations' tax should be used to subsidize the MTA taxpayer. Right now, the continuing rise in the subway fare, including the half-price fares for seniors and disabilities, has become very difficult for people that live on fixed incomes. You have to look at other ways of subsidizing the transportation. And
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Forat.
Tax breaks that we get in this city, that some of it should be looked at about going to the MTA to solve the accessibility issue for people. You have that responsibility, and I would like you to begin to respond publicly as individual members of this board to your constituency base and tell us what you individually are committed to do to make subways accessible for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forat. Dustin Jones, Nancy Montgomery, and then Julie Varagesi. Mr. Jones, good morning.
Good morning, board. My name is Dustin Jones, and I want to start by saying, just like you, I am a board member of Center for the Independence of the Disabled New York. And I also want to say, with all due respect, if I made decisions half as bad as you guys, I'd be fired. I want to also start by saying that a lot of your bus drivers are, for whatever reason, allergic to the curb. So whatever remedy you can find to feed it to them, please do it immediately. Second of all, you guys have no good slogans to attract wheelchair users to the subways. So I have one for you. Take New York City subways with a disability, and you get to meet New York City's finest and New York City's bravest. I want one of you to tell me why, for the past 3 months now, as recently as yesterday, every time I take the subway, almost once or twice per week, I am being rescued out of your station by a fireman or a police officer. Yesterday at Grand Central, I get off the 4. That's the only elevator working in that whole station. The NYPD and the fire department, once again, had to drag me out of that station. What are you guys going to tell me in case of an emergency? How do we get out?
Down to 30 seconds, Mr. Jones.
30 seconds, yeah. But it took more than that to get to work. But I got 30 seconds. How long is it going to take for you guys to do the right thing, have us stop coming here and talking about the same issues that, no offense, none of you even give a damn about in the first place?
Thank you. Nancy Montgomery, then Julie Varagesi, and then Edward Yude. Good morning.
Morning. So the state comptroller reported that the rates are going to be hiked because there was so much more spending that they just had to be hiked before the next time period that it was going to be hiked anyway. So I'm just wondering why it would need to be hiked and where all the spending, why so much money is being spent by the MTA to require that kind of hike. Is it because you're building elevators? I don't know of any plans for elevators. And are there more buses? I don't see plans for more buses or subway trains. It might be going to the Brooklyn-Queens connector train that's being proposed that's going to connect gentrified areas. Or maybe it's going to the new app that can only be accessed by people who have smartphones. So this is really a situation where class, race, and accessibility are just not being considered. They're just being disregarded. One of my friends who's disabled, who could not be here because she has low energy because she is disabled, she said that she has compared previous bus maps to current bus maps, and it shows that the bus routes have changed and have been cut out of working class neighborhoods and are going into the more privileged areas where newer developments are being built. And she also says that buses have been cut in half between the times 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Now, instead of 4 buses going through at a stop, it's 2 buses. So the solution to all of this is that just cancel the debt to the banks and use that money to pay for elevators and such, and let riders be.
You have to wrap up. You have 20 seconds.
Let riders be on this board, and on top of that, there was somebody who came here last time who was on the list, but she wasn't called to speak. I want to know how to file a formal complaint about that. Thank you.
Excuse me, could you tell us your name?
Her name was Terry Mitchell.
Well, I don't have you on the list either. How did that happen?
Last month.
No, your name.
My name is Julie
Varghese. That's what I thought. I'm looking for Nancy Montgomery. Thank you. And then Edward Yude.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to let me speak. My name is Nancy Montgomery. I'm the Deputy Supervisor of the town of Phillipstown along the Hudson Line. These are all tough issues. I want to first thank you for your efforts in using Narcan on your route and all those saves that I've been hearing about. It's the #1 most critical issue in my town that I'm faced with. I'm also the widow of the 12/1/13 train victim, Jim Lovell, and I am here because it's a month before the 4-year anniversary, and I just wanted to say hi. I haven't been here in a while. Since I've been here, you have a new Metro North president. I believe you have a new MTA chair. I'm not familiar because I haven't been following, but I'm back because we are a year out before the positive train control deadline, and I'm here to ask you how you're doing with that. When I attended meetings in the past, my concern was that you did not have safety on your agenda every month. I've since observed that you have safety on your agenda every other month. Now I'm here to ask, why isn't positive train control on your agenda every month? And I want to ask you if you are ready to go with that a year from now, and if you're not, why? I also want to ask how you're doing with the sleep apnea testing. I know that you had a pilot program, and those engineers involved in the pilot program were tested. I believe that others have not been. And I know the FRA has pulled away their mandate for it, and I know you're committed to doing it, but I don't believe it, because you launched the pilot program and you tested for those engineers, and you know, I just don't know where we're at with that now. So my question is,
you have
how
30
many
seconds
were on
left.
the board before the 2008 Rail Safety Improvement Act was implemented? And you know that part of that act was the installation of the positive train control. We still don't have it. We're almost 10 years away from when that act of Congress was enacted, and we're 4 years after the Spite and Dival accident. And why don't we have positive train control? So I thank you for your time. I hope you will implement these things that are in your charge. You're here to make policy for that. Forget about the middle management and the signs up on the trains. You know, you let your management control that. Make policy.
You have to wrap up,
for what
Ms.
you're
Montgomery.
charged with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Edward Yude, then Christian Cobb, and then Tony Murphy. Good morning.
My name is Edward Yude. My father, Louis. My name is Edward Yude. My father, Louis Yude,
was a civil engineer. He worked on building and maintaining the subways from the 1920s to the 1970s. When he became disabled, he could not ride the same trains and buses because they're so inaccessible. Today is my birthday. If my father was alive, he would ask me, what do I want for my birthday? I want 5 things. I want in the 355 subway stations that don't have elevators installed right now. I want portable metal ramps like they have on New Jersey Transit, because the level of the entrance to the train and the platform is not the same. People, wheelchair users and scooters, people have to be lifted up to get on and off the train. I want enough litter baskets and enough new hires of subway transit workers to get rid of the rats in the subways. I want this MTA board to have wheelchair users on it. You're in violation of the Americans with Disability Act. Can anybody see anybody on this board that has a wheelchair or a scooter? And most of all, Adolf Hitler invented the term the big lie. You tell a lie enough times, everybody will believe it. I want to end the big lie that there is no money for these services. Show us the money. And maybe even an idea whose time has come, the subways and the buses should be free.
You have 30
like
seconds,
they are
Mr.
in
Yud.
other places in the world. So I want to end by saying the MTA should be a service, not a business. The MTA should be a service, not a business. The MTA should be a service, not a business. The MTA should be a service, not a business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christian Cobb, and Tony Murphy, and then Miriam Fisher. Good morning, Mr. Cobb.
My name is Christian, and I'm with the People's MTA. And I'm not here to speak to these people, because as was said before, they don't give a damn. They do not represent the people. These are the people. You're the ones with all the power. And as was said before, the state comptroller mentioned that the MTA is spending so much money that they're going to need to raise the fare again on top of the already automatic fares in place. And where is that money going? It's not going to new elevators. Is it going to more buses? No. Is it going to more trains? No. So where is this money going? It's going to the banks. It's going to Wall Street. It's putting cops in the subway, harassing and arresting black, brown, and poor people. That's why we need to get the cops out of the subway. We need full accessibility. We need a free public transit system. We need a people's MTA. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Murphy, and then Miriam Fisher, and then Jessica Murray. Morning.
I'm Tony Murphy. I'm also with the People's MTA. I think it's after everything we've heard from this body, which I consider the People's MTA, let's call the meeting of the People's A to order now. Thank you. What do you think of this new proposal? Oh, it's not a new proposal. They'll deny it. But the state comptroller said there's going to be an unplanned fare hike. What do you think of that? Are you for that? Yay or nay? Boo. The MTA says they're not going to do it. Do you trust the MTA? That's what I thought. At the last board meeting that was here, the MTA went into great detail about how they couldn't provide elevator access. They said it's just not possible, and at these certain stations because of the layout of the station. And then someone said, well, what's your plan for this enhanced station initiative? The answer was, we'll get back to you. We don't know. That's a good question. We'll get back to you. The head of the MTA didn't know. Where is the money going? What are we getting other than police crackdowns on black and brown youth? 15,000 arrests have happened for quote-unquote fare evasion, theft of service. And 80% of those riders are African American and Latinx. What are we getting? And where's the real theft of service? The real theft of service is this board that's looting public transportation. There's $32 billion capital plan.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr. Murphy.
Now the MTA is in a hurry. So there's $32 billion owed to the banks. We know there's money, but it's only made available if someone can profit off of it. The Wall Street is looting public transportation. That's the real theft of service. Sign up on our clipboard if you want to be part of the People's MTA. We're having a meeting tonight, 7 o'clock, see me and we'll give you all the details. There should be full accessibility for all. Elevators are for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam Fisher. Ms. Fisher, then Jessica Murray, and the final speaker is Sasha Blair Goldenson. Good morning.
I'm Miriam Fisher, subway rider, former employee at International Center for the Disabled, and somebody with a bad back and a bad knee. I'm not going to repeat the ADA being 30 years old and the MTA being in violation, but I want to bring up some other issues that I haven't heard much discussion of. After last public meeting on October 25th, there was another meeting of a MTA committee that was available on YouTube. Some of the things that struck me from that meeting were discussion of the new subway lines proposed on 30th and 36th Street in Queens. PR, this must have cost money. The chair of the MTA was asked, are there elevators? He didn't know. Here's the answer, October 12th, before the 25th, newly enhanced MTA stations won't have wheelchair access. This was available before October 25th. Another thing mentioned at that meeting was the inability to retrofit some of the old stations because of their structure. I have not heard in the dialogue, in the vocabulary, I have not heard, is that better? In the dialogue, in the vocabulary.
And you have 32 seconds more, Ms.
Escalators and winding ramps like on Union Square, which would, I think, make available and negotiable subway rides for a large range of people, including people with mobility struggles. The MTA, New York City ranked 10th of major cities in accessibility. Old stations such as Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia have managed to increase accessibility to about 70%. The L train is going to be out of service for 15 months. I've heard no mention of elevators on some of the lines, or escalators, or
You have to finish,
ramps.
Ms. Fisher. Thank you very much. Jessica Murray.
Morning. My name is Jessica Murray. I'm here with Rise and Resist to promote the message that elevators are for everyone, not just people with disabilities. I'm a PhD student in developmental psychology at CUNY. I research the impact of transportation access on adult development, particularly for people with disabilities. I have multiple sclerosis, and while I'm able to walk and stand here today, that is not always the case, and it won't always be the case. From my interviews with disabled people in the city, I know many who arrange their entire lives around access to dependable transportation. Access-Ride is not dependable, and broken elevators make the subway not dependable. Now, I'll say something that you don't hear very often. I don't believe that the lack of elevators in the subway is your fault. The subway was built over 100 years ago, decades before the portable wheelchair was invented. It was designed for adult, able-bodied men. Before the ADA in the 70s, rather than accommodating veterans who just wanted to take the subway to work, your predecessors at the MTA started digging in, resisting laws about architectural barriers, and they've been fighting disabled passengers in court ever since. The ADA is also flawed. It's an unfunded mandate, and it required paratransit as a safety net and a complement to fixed transit for disabled passengers, not as a primary mode of travel. The MTA's decision to go all in on paratransit rather than invest in elevators is how we ended up where we are today, with a subway that's only 23% accessible on a good day, and with the most expensive and inefficient paratransit service in the country. Making accessibility improvements, especially fixing the elevator situation in the subway, is the only way to reduce paratransit demand. The ridership of the subway has evolved in the past century, and I've observed who actually uses elevators in the subway. Older passengers, mothers traveling with their young children, often in strollers, pregnant women, passengers heading for the airport. Elevators make transportation accessible to everyone. Please let go of the entrenched, litigious mentality of the past and look to the future. Do something about the stations that are being renovated right now and won't be touched again for decades in my lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Sasha Blair Goldenson. Morning.
Hello, Board. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak. My name is Sasha Blair Goldenson. I'm with the Elevators for Everyone campaign, part of Rise and Resist. And I'm here representing all these folks here that you may have seen. And we don't all show up here in our wheelchairs for fun. We don't all show up here just because we didn't have anything better to do. We're here with a job and a mission and a message that I want each of you to hear and really listen to and act on. We have these 2 flyers that have a message that I demand or strongly ask that you look at your meeting. You don't have anybody in a wheelchair on your committee, so can you please look over these flyers and talk about how you're going to fix the problems that they talk about? Like Jessica said, you guys started with a bad hand. We get it. It was 20% when you started, but you can fix it. You can make it better. Each of you can. Look at me. Look at these flyers. And what does it say on them? It shows New York at the very bottom, very bottom. There's no reason for this. We keep hearing it's not possible. It is possible. Have some vision. Do you guys want to be the MTA board that perpetuated this lack of accessibility and disenfranchised not just people in wheelchairs, but like Jess said,
30 seconds, sir.
Seniors, parents with strollers, travelers with luggage, all these groups, delivery people, the MTA's own workers can't get their jobs done. You guys can be that MTA board that turned it around, that started to fix it. Get up this list. You're on the very bottom. We can do better. New York can do better. Let's get this done, guys. Start today at your meeting. Look at these flyers. Discuss how you're going to do it. And we want to see it in the minutes.
You'll have to wrap up, sir.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that's our last speaker.
Thank you. My comments today will be brief because we're going to be having a presentation later on by Bob Ferran, the CFO, who will be presenting our financial plan for the next 4 years as well as the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2018. Let me say a few words about the Governor's Executive Order 168, which was issued earlier this summer in connection with the Penn Station service reductions due to switch and track-related work being done by Amtrak and the substantial service disruptions within the subway system. All future extensions by the Governor of the Executive Order will be consistent with the Executive Orders issued in connection with Superstorm Sandy. And I'd like to advise, as I've mentioned to many of you members, the important change in this process going forward. Going forward, the staff will bring these items to the Board for formal review and ratification. This will happen every month. This is a process that we've used in the past, and a Board ratification is consistent with the all-agency procurement guidelines that has also been approved by the Board. Further, I have asked the Auditor General to review and audit the purchases made under the Executive Order, and the Auditor General will report these findings to the Audit Committee of the Board. Now on to the Subway Action Plan. Subway performance in September continued to show increasing signs of stabilization. It's clear that the initiatives undertaken as part of the plan have begun to arrest the multi-year downward slide in performance. And nowhere is this more evident than in the category of major incidents that cause delays. For the month of September, we logged 69 weekday major incidents, 5% better than the 12-month average, 12-month rolling average. Looking just at 2017, we averaged 77 major weekday incidents per month in the first half of the year, compared to 62 major incidents per month since the implementation of the plan. This represents a reduction of 19%. As you know, under the action plan, we're paying close attention to all of our infrastructure. We've repaired thousands of track defects, installed miles of welded rail, inspected and repaired hundreds, if not thousands, of signals, cleaned many miles of roadbed, and I believe these efforts are starting to pay off. Compared to the first half of this year, in the third quarter, average monthly track incidents declined over 7%, average monthly major signal incidents fell over 21%, average monthly debris-related fires dropped 20%, and the average monthly right-of-way incidents as a whole are down nearly 20%. I cannot overemphasize, however, the importance of addressing and reducing these major incidents. A single major incident can profoundly disrupt the system and delay all of our customers. And they obviously have a disproportionate effect on our performance statistics. For instance, on September 14th, a broken third rail protection board near 72nd Street on the west side IRT during the morning rush hour delayed 168 trains in just that little over an hour. That signal day alone worsened our overall passenger metrics, new ones, of additional platform time and additional train time by 5% for the entire month of September. So the Subway Action Plan also addresses our fleet. In September, the mean distance between failure was 123,000 miles, which is a 23% improvement from August, from 1 month in August, and a 14% improvement from the year earlier. Similarly, a 12-month fleet MDBF in September at 119,000 miles represents the 5th straight month of improvement. As I've said in the past, and I said last month in particular, the Subway Action Plan is starting to get us back on track, and thanks to all of our workers who are seeing this, who are providing us with these ever-increasing positive results. And with that, I want to thank you all. Before we start and approve the minutes, are there any questions, comments?
And along with thanking all of the people for the Subway Action Plan, I think we also have to acknowledge and thank the riders who are putting up with lots of additional GOs and overnight and weekend work because it's obviously affecting them. I do have one question, because you did mention MDBF. Because the R32 fleet and the R42 fleet continues to show really bad performance, I'm wondering, when will we see the R211 procurement here?
It's next month. Yeah, I believe it's going to be in December. We will be prepared to bring that forward.
Thanks.
And I thought you were going to ask me about the prior one. We're still waiting for more deliveries from the prior coming from. Okay. Yes. Okay. The minutes of the October board meeting have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections, omissions? If not, may I have a motion to approve? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. The first report is from the Finance Committee, and it's from Mr. Schwartz. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. The Finance Committee met on Monday, and I report on the following. There are 3 competitive procurements this month totaling $15.1 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I second that. Do we have any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
There are no non-competitive procurements and no ratifications. There are 6 real estate action items which are described on pages 49 through 58 in the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these real estate items, and I move them.
I'll second that. Do we have any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's carried.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you. Now on to the Transit and Bus Committee report by Commissioner Ferrer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Transit and Bus Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There are 11 competitive procurement actions this month in the total amount of $105 million described on pages 59 through 70 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
And I'll second that. And do we have any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
There are no non-competitive procurements and no ratifications, and that concludes the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Ferrer. Now on to the Metro-North Committee report. Dr. Metzger.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and fellow board members. The Metro-North Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 2 procurement items this month. There is 1 non-competitive procurement in the amount of $500,000, which begins on page 76. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second.
All in favor? Any questions or comments before we have the vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
There is one request to authorize the requests for proposal process. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it. It begins on page 80.
I'll second that. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are no ratifications, and this concludes the Metro North Committee meeting.
Thank you. Now on to the Long Island Railroad Committee report. Commissioner Pally.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Long Island Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There is one competitive procurement in the amount of $1.4 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Item has been seconded. Are there any questions or answers? Yes.
Yes, on page
Commissioner.
88, the personal service contract to security control officer consultants. I had asked if why this is only a Long Island Railroad contract, that why we wouldn't want to do this for all agencies, or maybe we do in separate contracts. And I was asking if it isn't possible this to be MTA-wide, and if not, why it wasn't. And I didn't hear back whether Transit does this separately, Metro North does this separately, or what the story is. Is there someone who...
Yeah, I'd not heard that question before, so if you could address it to me or to Ronnie or to Pat, we'll get back to you as quickly as we
Okay,
can.
I'd asked
Not
at the Long
today.
Island Railroad Committee, so I was...
At the Railroad Committee?
Yeah,
Okay.
where this was presented, so I don't know what...
Before you leave today, we'll have an answer
Okay,
for you.
thank you.
Okay. Pat.
Dennis, did you run this down?
We did ask the transit, and the services that we're looking for under the contract will be, they can handle those services in-house. However, the contract will be able to be used by any agency. We have that language in the contract. So
What's the service
if any agency does require those services, they'll be able to use that contract under our procurement.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There are no non-competitive procurement or ratifications this month, and this concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Pally. Now we'd like to hear from the Bridges and Tunnels Committee. From its chair, Commissioner Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday. For all of the following actions, the committee voted in favor of the items, although a committee quorum was not present for a vote. There are 3 procurement actions this month totaling $6.72 million. There is one non-competitive procurement in the amount of $550,000. The committee members present voted in favor of this procurement, and I move it.
I'll second it. Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
There are 2 competitive procurements this month totaling $6.166 million. The committee members present voted in favor of those procurements, and I move them.
I'll second it. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, there are no ratifications. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels report.
Thank you, Commissioner Merdler. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to MTA Chief Financial Officer Bob Ferran, who will present the November financial plan and the proposed budget for 2018. As you know, and we discussed this previously, the vote on the 18 budget will be at the next board meeting in December. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in front of you the MTA 2018 final proposed budget and the November financial plan 2018 to 2021. There are 2 volumes. First, volume 1 is an executive summary, which presents both the baseline budget for the MTAs on a consolidated basis and certain below-the-line adjustments that we are proposing, and at a future date the board will vote on. Also, the larger Volume 2 includes the baseline budget for the MTA on a consolidated basis and also for each of the individual agencies with the narrative describing what happened. This information is up on our website, and I'd encourage the public to take advantage of the information. What I'd like to do now is go through and give you a brief presentation summarizing the financial plan and proposed budget. First, let's start with what we looked at and what we saw at the July plan. The July plan projected break-even and small cash balances through 2019 with a gap in of $112 million and $493 million in 2020 and 2021. Now, just as a reminder, when we have a cash balance, that's indicated by the green bars, hash bars up there, that cash balance rolls forward into the next year to offset operating expenses in that year. We're required to maintain our books and records on a self-sustaining basis. That basically means we can use cash balances at the end of one year to offset expenses in the next. However, we also maintain our books on a GAAP basis, generally accepted accounting principles, and that's audited by our auditors every year. So that's what we were looking at the July. Out-year gaps of $112 million in 2020 and a larger gap in 2021. So what has changed since the July plan? Well, there's certain changes and re-estimates that worsen our financial condition, and there's some that improve it. First, it's kind of a revenue story. We've had lower fare box toll revenue estimates of about $281 million over this plan period. That is between 2017 to 2021. Now, what this really reflects is we have had a decrease in ridership between 16 and 17, and that reflects several things. One, we had severe storms in January and February, and also we had a heavy Winter Storm Stella in March, and where we had a preemptive shutdown. So that affected our ridership between 2016 and 2017. We've also had an unseasonably cool Memorial Day weekend, and that affected us. Heavy rain too, so our ridership. So ridership between 16 and 17 is down about 2%, but we're still projecting growth in ridership on a year-by-year basis going forward. But in total, that hits us and reduces us about $40 to $45 million a year on transit. Bridge and tunnels, we're down about $10 to $15 million a year that we're projecting. And that really reflects the fact that with open road tolling, which is a convenience for all of our customers, we're seeing more people shift over to Easy Pass as opposed to paying cash. And we've received less revenue on Easy Pass than we do on cash, which again is good for our customers, but that's a reduction. We also have the continuing story about lower real estate revenues. This is primarily in the real property transfer tax. That's a 1% tax that's applied on the sale of commercial properties greater than $500,000. If you go year-to-date through October of 2016 compared to year-to-date October 2017, that's been a decline of about $237 million. So we're seeing a significant reduction in that. We also have lower advertising revenues of about $143 million. This is a result of the new contract that we've awarded where we're having the vendor provide a significant number of additional digital screens, replacing the hard copy ads that we have up there. They have to recoup the cost of these digital screens, which will provide not only ads, but also customer information on a real-time basis. Once those costs are recouped, we expect to see our advertising revenue increase significantly. So it really is an investment now, both to enhance the service we provide to our customers as well as future revenues. And then we're projecting just this year, upcoming year, lower MMTOA, that's Metropolitan Mass Transit Operating Assistance, of about $80 million. And that's just a re-estimate that comes from basically reviewing the numbers. We have had changes in re-estimates improving our financial results over the plan period, and that's primarily with debt service. We've done refundings, which have saved us money by substituting higher cost debt with lower interest debt. We've had lower interest rates on our variable rate portfolio, and also we're not issuing the debt on the same schedule we thought, so it's been pushed out a bit, which saves us cash flow. In total, if you take these changes and other changes, the financial results are about $309 million weaker over the financial plan period. So let's look at what the highlights are of the November plan. Well, the first highlight is what the chairman has mentioned in the subway action plan. So This action plan, which we'll talk about in a little bit, represents an investment of about $1.5 billion through the 2021 period. And it reflects the governor's commitment to fund half of that plan. We're also maintaining higher savings targets that we identified both in the February plan and also in the November plan. And those higher savings targets, that's additional cuts that we are planning to make that won't affect service, of $200 million this coming year, $250, $300, and $350 million by 2021. We have identified almost $100 million of savings initiatives to put in place. So we have these targets, but we're addressing those targets by identifying initiatives or measures that we're taking. We continue to propose a fare and toll increase of 4% in 2019 and 2021. And I do need to emphasize, that's for financial projection purposes only. Any fare and toll increase has to go through public hearings, has to be considered by the board, and it will be subject to future board action if we put it in place. But for financial projection purposes, I build it into the forecast. But I would point out that in our projections of inflation in the future, and these come from our econometric firm, we are looking at cost increases, CPI increases on a 2-year period at 19 of 5.5%, and projections over a 2-year period in 2021 of 5.3%. So the projections that we're putting in place for possible fare and toll increases are less than what we're projecting inflation to be by a significant margin. We're also using $170 million of reserves to offset expenses in 2018. So the bottom line is the budget continues to be balanced through 2019 with 2020 and 2021 gaps increasing to $352 million and $643 million respectively. Now, you heard the chairman talk about the subway action plan, and it's been discussed in prior board meetings. Here it is. You'll be able to see this, look at this, on our website in more detail. But over the next 14 months, the plan is to jumpstart this action plan and then get us to a level where it can be sustained so that the results that the chairman mentioned can be continued to develop. And it's in the various areas: track infrastructure, signal, power, car equipment, stations, safety, communication, and other areas. It does come at a cost. And the next chart here, in the shaded area, the box for 17 and 18, you can see the initial cost of the plan. The chairman has said before, the plan is an $836 million total cost through 18. And it's divided between operating costs of about $508 million and then capital cost of about $348 million. Now, the capital cost will end up being bonded, so the ongoing cost of those will be about $20 million a year. But I went ahead and put 2019, 2020, and 2021 up because that will be the ongoing cost that the MTA would incur to keep this plan in place moving forward. So the total cost as you go forward would be roughly about $320 million a year. And with that type of investment, ongoing investment, we believe that the kind of results that the chairman mentioned will continue to be improved upon. Implementing the subway action plan will require board action. First, the 2018 operating cost will be and is included in this budget that you're going to be asked to vote on in the December meeting. All the capital costs will be presented in a proposed amendment to the 2015 to 2019 capital plan, and that will be presented to you for your approval in December. Yeah, sure.
Quick question. On the previous slide where you have car equipment as part of the subway action plan, are you referring to maintaining existing car fleet, or are you taking into account new cars that will have come onto the property? Both.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You know, we talked about these increased savings targets, MTA efficiencies. We believe that we have to keep raising the bar and try to reduce our expenses where we can. Now, we've talked about increasing expenses for the subway action plan, and we're committed to spending more money there, but there's got to be ways where we can cut costs through consolidations, more efficient, administrative efforts. And so what I presented on this chart is how we've raised the bar each and every year. And you can see the top bar, the blue, is how we've raised the targets. So this year we're going to hit somewhere north of $1.6 billion of annually recurring cost since 2010. We're adding $200 million more next year and continuing it up. So the target will be somewhere in the a little north of $2.2 billion by the time we get to 2021. And again, that's a target. You can see that we have hit our targets to date, but these targets are aggressive and they're getting harder to hit. But we are still committed to pursuing those. Let's look to see what we have done. The height of each of those bars shows the unidentified targets that we had at the beginning of the year. So you can see in 2017, we had $116 million worth of targets that we had not identified an initiative or we hadn't implemented something. Well, we have done that. So we hit the target in 2017, and because these are annually recurring savings, those savings continue on through 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. What the blue solid bars reflect are the targets still to be identified and implemented. So again, roughly a little more than $200 million for next year, increasing to $309 in the next year. But again, whatever we hit next year carries forward into the future years. So again, we are truly committed, and we do track these things. They're not bogus numbers. We track our ability to achieve them, and if we slip, if we fall back and we don't continue the savings, we back them out and we try to come up with other initiatives to carry forward.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
Bob, could you please share with the board where those 27...
Could you speak up?
Sure.
Can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Could you please share with the board where those 2017 savings came from?
Sure. Some of it is health and welfare, medical rebid. We had estimates on what we thought we were going to save by rebidding some of our health care contracts. We're actually saving more money, so that reflects that. Prescription benefit rebid, we have additional savings there. We have paratransit. We've shifted more to vouchers, taxis, and e-health applications. We've negotiated a lower Easy Pass unit cost for the transponder. Bridge and tunnel, there's been savings on maintenance and bridge painting. ORT, because we're now going to this, the electronic or bill by mail, the cash collection and processing has saved us money. So those are some of the areas we've done it. Okay, so the plan continues to fund important investments, and it's balanced through 2019. The 2020 and 2021 gaps will need to be addressed, and new revenue sources have to be identified for operations and for capital. Every time we add service, whether it's an additional bus line or whether it is the extension of the number 7 or opening up the 2nd Avenue subway, phase 1, that increases our cost. And it doesn't necessarily have the same impact on our revenues. In fact, if we're shifting riders from one place to a place that's more convenient or one location where it's been overcrowded to another, we're going to get some enhanced revenue, but really it's an increased cost. So anytime we increase service, we expect to see costs to go up. And this is also the kind of profile that you see every time we do a financial plan. There are gaps in the out years, and we just address them. And as we get closer, we have started to nibble away and sometimes take big bites out of those gaps and bring them down. So this is the same profile you've seen, but it's been 10 years since we've received the last major investment in revenues, and so I know it's something that the task force that the governor set up is looking at, and I know it's something that there's been a great deal of dialogue, but additional revenues will be needed. Now, there are risks to this plan. And the risk that I mention every time is if we don't hit the savings targets, okay, those out-year gaps come sooner and they get bigger. And you can see now that without hitting the savings targets, we're going to have a gap that comes in 2018, and it grows to over $1 billion in 2021. If we don't hit our savings targets and we don't have additional revenues coming in as projected with the proposed fare and toll increases in 2019 and 2020, you can see it only gets worse, with projected out-year deficits that could be as large as $1.6, $1.7 billion. So what are the challenges for us going forward? Well, first is to provide full funding for the Subway Action Plan. You heard the results that we've seen thus far. We want to continue it. To secure new sustainable funding for operations and capital. To implement biennial fare and toll increases, and again, we're trying to keep them at inflation or less. Achieve the cost reduction targets. To enhance customer experience and fund continued investment in maintenance and operations. Respond to general economic conditions. We don't know where the economy is going. It still seems to be okay right now, but it could change. And with the Federal Reserve's action in the future, we could see higher interest rates, higher than what we've built into our financial forecast, which again has a conservative estimate on where rates will be, but if rates go through the roof, that will affect the cost of our capital program. For your information, we've put the final chart up there, and we'll leave it up there as we have questions. But this just shows where the money comes from at the MTA and where the money goes. And on the left side, where the money comes from, you can see that roughly 51% of our budget comes from fares and tolls. A significant portion, about 42%, comes from dedicated taxes or state and local subsidies. Where does the dollars go? On the right side, you can see that the biggest expense we have is payroll. It's about 62% of our budget, and that includes both direct payroll, overtime, health and welfare, pension. Debt service is about 16% of our budget. And then non-labor cost is about 22% of our budget. So you can see where we're going to have to try to cut in these costs going forward. Much of it will be in the non-labor. We're constantly reviewing our debt portfolio to see if we can save money there. But again, our biggest cost are the people who perform the services on behalf of our customers, our employees. And so that's something that we're not trying to address or to hit. So that really is the presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. I'd like to open up the floor for discussion.
So, as far as the Subway Action Plan goes, and you mentioned secure full funding for it, if we're not able to get full funding for it, that means that the various items will just take longer to get accomplished. It doesn't mean they won't get done, correct?
What we're going to do is we'll rescope the program at that time, and we think all of them are important elements, and so we want to do all of those elements. Yes, it may take us longer to do them, or we may just a reprioritization, but the goal is try to continue this program because it looks to be successful, and we want to continue it.
And something I think I say every year, I think the secure new sustainable funding part is extremely important because if you follow the 2% every year or 4% every other year fare hikes, at some point we'll have $10 fares and $50 tolls, and that's probably not sustainable. So I really hope that we can all agree and get behind a new sustainable funding source so that all of this is not on the backs of our riders.
Agreed. Agreed. So, source is?
Source is. Even better.
Yes, Commissioner Weisbrod.
I have a couple of questions. Going back to slide 3, the last bullet point on slide 3 says the budget continues to be balanced through 2019 based on these various anticipated factors. What do you mean by that? Does that mean that with a commitment of 1/2 of the Subway Action Plan, it'll be balanced?
The way we have the Subway Action Plan built in there, it is self-balancing, if you will. We have assumed that the money that the governor has promised, 1/2 of the Subway Action Plan comes in. We assume that there will be funding for the other half, and there's a request in, and there's conversations going on with the city right now to fund it. If that does not come forth, then the plan will be scaled back. It will not be funded at any level above what we believe we will have sustainable funding. So, yes, yeah, Commissioner, that's correct.
And may I? I just want to pursue a question I raised at the committee meeting on Monday, which is, frankly, when you look at the metrics so far under the Subway Action Plan, and I know that we're only really a few months into it, most of them are either pretty flat or, in fact, not as good as we might hope. And intuitively, I think we believe that the actions that we're taking in the Subway Action Plan are going to have an impact. But there are several different items in it, and as we go into 2018, can we begin to assess which elements of the Subway Action Plan in fact are having an impact and which ones may not be having an impact? And perhaps this is a question to the chair. To what extent do you anticipate the Subway Action Plan itself being modified as we learn what has an impact and what doesn't?
So when you look at the components of the Subway Action Plan, and whether we're working with the rail or working with the cars, and if we see one thing is working better than another, we will evaluate it. We're at a point right now where we're starting to look at where it makes the most sense. However, what we're doing is, and you remember there are some heat charts that I may have shown some members, that we're going in and we're working on all of the things at the same time. So to distinguish what's working and what's not, since we're doing it during the night and over the weekends on multiple different areas all at the same time, it's not necessarily easy at this point to break that out. But we do evaluate it daily as to what's happening. And, whether it's from delays and what's causing the delay or what's causing a breakdown or what's causing a disruption and what's causing it in comparison to what caused it in the past. So, yes, we will continue to evaluate that.
So I realize we'll be, at the end of this year, roughly 6 months into it, and hopefully beginning to get a sense of what's effective and what isn't. And that, just assume, might have also cost implications one way or another.
At the end of this year, not to look at the numbers that way, but I think we'll be in for 4 months. It started in full bore. It was announced in August and then went full bore in mid-August, so 4.5 months. But it doesn't matter. It's still 4.5 months into an intensive program, and we will be evaluating it, as I said, on a daily basis. Yes. Commissioner Jones.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, Bob, I looked at the pie chart you have at the end. Do you have any projections of what our debt service is going to grow to in the year after? Where are we headed in terms of debt service?
Yeah. Our debt service continues to increase. We are projecting in 2021 that the debt service will be $3.2 billion. We're about $2.6 billion right now. As a percentage of our revenues, right now we're 16% of our budget. It'll go up to about 19% is what we're projecting, which is really pretty much what we've had in the out years going forward. And that's because, again, as our debt service goes up, our revenues have gone up. But it's about 19%, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bob, so I'm just trying to get my head around. So in this sustainable incremental revenue, what would the amount be that we should be aiming for on a going forward basis that would balance this plan in 2 different points? One, if we don't do any fare increases, and one, if we don't. What are we aiming for here?
Well, fare increases, when we've been doing the 4% projections, that's about $325 million a year on an annualized basis. So if you wanted to avoid the 19 and the 21 fare and toll increases, you'd need about $650 million on an annual basis. Again, just the fact that our operating cost, again, with new service that's being added, and by the time, if you think about it, when we get to 2022, we're going to just about be ready to open up East Side Access, and so that'll be incremental cost. So to me, you're looking at something that's probably in the billion-dollar range.
And when I look at the cost and I see the subway action plan, it still doesn't appear there's a large incremental capital investment. So it seems like this is more of making sure that the system is functioning, but we're really not creating that 21st century rebuilding of the system.
Yeah, the way we looked at it, it's what capital do we need that's right now not in our capital program to jumpstart it, and then thereafter it'll be built into our capital program going forward. So,
And what years would that be?
that would be, again, 19, 20, 21.
That's what's existing today, and then after that, you're saying? Or
No, I'm saying that the capital is
I got
only
you.
for
Okay.
17 to 18, and so any capital needs for
Afterwards.
the subway action would be reflected in the next capital program.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to address one thing. Carl, I think I heard you say that you haven't seen incremental changes in the numbers. So let me go over again what I've said and what's included. We've seen 20% reduction in delays month to month. We've seen a 7% reduction in track incidents, a 21% reduction in signal incidents, a 20% reduction in fires due to debris, and a 20% right-of-way incidents that have caused us problems. I'd like them to be higher, but they're still, for the most part, with the exception of one, double-digit, and so we will continue to move in that direction.
And I was really referring to longer-term standards of platform delays, train waits, and the like, which basically have remained flat. So.
Those are the newest metrics that we've put in, the newest performance metrics. Understood. Yes, Commissioner Pally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For someone who was here in 2009 and is again here in 2017, the 2009 agreement between then Governor Patterson and the legislature at that time, while it was and may have been appropriate at that time, in my opinion, is no longer appropriate and helpful to this body. It is clear from your discussion and the numbers and Commissioner Reckler's questions that operating and capital needs of this organization have increased for, in my opinion, most of the right reasons, not all of it, but most of the right reasons. And we are, I am hopeful that in the current discussions which are taking place, whether it's congestion pricing, whether it's a millionaire's tax, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter, that both operating and capital needs of this agency for the next 10 years will be taken into account without the need for additional fare increases. I support my colleagues' concern, especially for those of us who represent areas which pay by the mile and not pay by the trip, that the numbers, especially for those of us in Suffolk County, are getting to the point where they are getting much too big in that regard, much too high, and it's time, in my opinion, that we try and do something about that, and a elimination of the fare increase for 2019 and 2021 is, in my opinion, a welcome and hopeful endeavor that not just this board, but our financing partners can accomplish. Because I think that's the only way that we can show our riders in all different parts of the system, and I don't just mean Long Island, but my friends from Metro North and our friends who ride the subway system, that we are taking their concerns into account, especially in these times of where service is clearly and not up to what we expect it to be and what it has been in the past. So I'm hopeful that in whatever capacity that can be done, because for many of us who have gone through a number of these fare increases over the years, I think we're getting to the point where that is no longer an acceptable option. Then I have two other questions, but go ahead if you want.
Well, I was just going to say, we like to say we're agnostic as to revenue.
Right.
Policymakers will decide what revenues we receive and
Yes.
how to equitably spread those out. I think what's important for us to do is to continue to try to cut costs where we can and
Right.
be more efficient, because to me, that's the only way we maintain credibility with people.
No,
And
yeah.
so I hear you.
I mean, I fully, and, you know, we've always supported the savings enhancements in the various budgets for the last 10 years that we've had them. But it's clear that they are becoming harder and harder to find, issue one. And number two, they by themselves will not solve the financing problem. They are part of the solution, but they are not by themselves a total solution. And whatever other revenue enhancements are necessary are going to be necessary here. Two other issues that I had that I wanted to raise. Number one, and I'll either give it to the chair and he can provide it, or Pat or whatever. We included, or what in the 2017 budget, when we added to it, there were obviously inclusions of costs because of the issues relating to the Long Island Railroad over the summer and the subway system, obviously, and a number of additional programs were instituted over that period of time that proved to be very helpful to, I'll speak only for my commuters, in getting to and from New York City. And I am hopeful that the 2018 budget includes those programs, because I don't want to go backwards, obviously. If a program has proven to be successful, and obviously they were, I want to make sure that those programs are included in at least the Long Island, and I'm sure others may have the same with regard to the 2018 budget.
To the extent they were proven to be successful, I'm sure they were included in the budget, and I would let the presidents talk about that. But yes, we were there to fund whatever worked, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Because as we all know, we're going to go through it again. Maybe not, hopefully not to the extent we went through it this summer, but we're going to go through some things in that regard.
Some of the things that were included this past summer, which I don't think will be necessary in this, upcoming issue with Amtrak and Penn, are ferry boats, things like that. But the core communications, the core information, how the schedules went, how we asked passengers to change connections instead of coming into Penn, going through either Long Island City or Atlantic Terminal. Yes.
Those are our issues, and we need to continue those for the convenience of our commuters. Okay. And the last thing I had is, obviously, over the last number of months, not just today, but over a period of time, the issue of access, both to the subway and bus system, specifically in the city, but it goes beyond that to the issues of accessoride, and that the accessibility issue in all of its components has been a major issue here. I know many of us who are here, we get very frustrated because, it may just be, and, I'll put it out there, that we are lousy operators of an accessoride system. It may be that we shouldn't be in that business. Maybe we should try to find somebody else to do that for us, because every couple of years we hire somebody new and they do a lousy job. And the public comes to us for accessibility issues, and rightly so. We have a responsibility, obviously, in the capital needs to try to make the system as accessible as possible from a capital standpoint. From an operating and administrative standpoint, I'm not sure we are the best operators of an accessoride system. In the outlying counties, the government does that. Maybe that's an option in New York City to include it with their social services programs, or maybe there are other options as to how to make the program work, because we include money into the program, as does the city, and we do not seem to be getting our money's worth. Either we're not getting our money's worth, or our riders who use the system are not getting their money's worth. And I think we need to take another look at that. I assume the current program is in the budget for the next 4 or 5 years in whatever numbers there are. I'm hopeful that maybe we can find another way to do it, another mechanism to make sure our riders have the accessibility they need without continuing to use a program which has proven, at least to many of us, including myself, not to be successful. And that continuation of a non-successful program, just because we can't find an alternative at the moment, is not appropriate to me. We need to see what else we can do in that regard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Bob, I'd be curious to see when you get a chance, if you could give me some metrics on the funding levels we receive from the various real estate taxes. And where my head is going with this is I have some concerns, and there's nothing that I think we can do about to even model this now, but based on potential changes to federal tax law, the impact on real estate values and real estate transactions concerns me, because such a meaningful portion of the dedicated revenues we do have derive from those. And I think about this great need we have for new revenue sources, and I think how much more dire that could be potentially if some of the impacts that I can conceive from those changes in federal tax law were to transpire. Is there a way to understand, subsequent to the meeting at some point, what those are and what the impact would be by some tranches of lessening volume of transaction?
Yeah, we can provide information. Just as a point of reference, we get really two types of real estate revenue. The real property transfer tax that I mentioned, which is a 1% on certain commercial properties as they exchanged hands, and the other is the mortgage recording tax. And obviously, if we're going to be going into an environment where mortgage rates are going to start going up, we're not going to benefit from refinancing of mortgages. And then it's the question of if there is a limitation on the deductibility of mortgages, that might affect it too.
That's exactly my concern.
Yeah, so we can provide additional information to you.
Okay, thank you.
And there is in here all types of information about the assumptions that are built in, not taking into account what's on the table in Congress right now with the tax bill, but it's included in here. We have other materials that we include in our investor information that also go into great detail about the sources of our revenues, which I think we may have just received an official statement that included a lot of that. Okay. Yes. Veronica?
Thank you. This November financial plan shows that we will continue to make or put aside money in our general reserve for 18 through 21, which is good because we've had to draw down on that reserve for the subway action plan. Are these levels consistent with the amount we've put aside in reserves in previous years?
Yes, what we do is we put 1% of our operating budget aside. That's the target. And then if we, at the end of the year, that money's available at the board's direction, at our request and the board's direction, we've tried to use it for things that provide ongoing benefits. So we've made deposits into the Long Island Railroad Additional Pension Plan, which was very underfunded at 27%. Now we're up to about 57%, which reduces future costs. We could use it to avoid debt, pay-as-you-go capital, or we could use it to pay down debt. This year, just as we did with after Sandy, we've used it to offset some of the operating budget. So as our real estate revenues came down this year, we used $135 million of it to offset those. So we continue to set money aside in each budget, and it's there either for unexpected expenses or for shortfalls in revenue. So we're doing it consistently.
And then the $20 million that's remaining will roll into 2018.
That's right.
And we will draw down on that as shown in the financial plan.
Correct.
A second and final question, if I may. So there's a bridge and tunnel necessary reconstruction reserve. And it notes that in July, the MTA proposed the suspension of contributions to this reserve from 2018 to 2021. Where's that money going?
What we do is by board policy, we had set operating monies aside for the event that Triborough Bridge and Tunnel, or the Bridges and Tunnels, was unable to access the market and therefore wasn't able to make necessary capital construction projects. The balance had gotten up to a level. We decided to draw that balance down for some of the capital projects this year rather than selling Triborough debt. And instead of just increasing it, we're going to hold it. I think the level is like 325 or 350. So we're just not increasing it. okay? And that's basically because now with much of what we've done with open road tolling, we don't have the same need for the plaza reconstructions that we had. So we just kind of felt that right now it made sense not to add additional, funds to it. So, but we're still maintaining it at a healthy balance so that if bridges and tunnels needed to, there's money for capital expenditures, even if we don't have access to the market.
And the amount that is no longer going into the fund because the fund's been built up goes into the equation where a percentage goes to transit, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North in its existing agreements. So it does flow through to the operating agencies as a subsidy.
Was that a board action?
I think the establishment of the necessary reconstruction reserve was a board action years ago, and now it just gets included in the budget. But okay. I believe
but
it
now
was
it's
a board.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Saul.
I had asked Bob to give me some data on payroll at the last meeting's number of active participants on the payroll now is before. And it's very interesting. I mean, the payroll portion of our expenses, I think Bob said was 63%. And the one thing I think, and the emergency action that you're taking and adding more workers into the operating end of the business, I think if you look at the payroll, I wonder how much and what is the right percentage of administrative versus operating personnel in the system. And Joe, I don't know how much time you've spent in this, but if you look at the thing, I really wonder that maybe we just have too many administrative and overhead personnel compared to the operating and the maintenance people that are out in the field. And I think that would be a very interesting thing that Bob and you and the board and Ronnie obviously should look at. And my gut is that we're top-heavy in administrative as opposed to operating personnel. And I think that's something we should look at this budget going forward, because if we are having a harder time now, the low-hanging fruit's gone. I assume that the purchasing is going to be much better now with the moving forward of that whole consolidation process. I think you're going to have to look to the payroll and how it's allocated to come up with some of these savings.
We've started that process, Andrew, so we will work with you and the board on that as we evaluate what's the right thing to do. Yes.
Bob, is there a way to look at what our cost of participation in our own pension plans are versus the cost of participation in NYSERS? And I'm not sure how you would make an apples to apples of that, because I'm sure the contracts are different. And where my head is obviously going is one more economically efficient than the other, because there's real cost around these pension plan participation for us. And I understand that even if we were able to figure out a way to model apples to apples, it may not be up to us to participate and have employees in one versus the other. But it's a place I'm curious to explore a little bit. And if you could give some thought to if there is a way to understand, if you had the same payroll and they're the same contract participating in one versus the other, is there a cost difference?
Jamie, yes, we can absolutely do the analysis. I do believe that in fact, all of the transit workers, part of the TWU, are in fact part of NYSERS.
Oh, I understand, and
Right.
it's a significant contribution we make, and they have, not unlike us, a significant underfunding. And my casual recollection is
So you would like to see if they weren't in NYSERS, what would they be under the
if
comprehensive
you took
program, vice versa?
just
Fine.
to see if we're performing much better or they're performing much better, is there some thought to be had as to where tranches of employees participate, not knowing if we have that right or could even, but it's an interesting thing to explore because there are real dollars.
Right. I'm not sure who we and they are, but nonetheless, we
fair
can
enough.
flip it either way.
Yes.
And then, because, they're, right, they're part of agreements that have gone back to their original entities as to where their pensions are
No
going.
question, but there's always a new CBA coming up, and if for the employee, if the end benefit is the same, and it's just something I'd like to look at and just give a little bit of thought to.
I'll fit you up for a flak jacket, and when Mike, go ahead and do it, you come with me.
Well,
and we'll do that.
As
We'll
you
do
know,
the
I've not been
analysis.
adverse to things that
I know
require
that.
flak jackets
Right.
here at the MTA.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. There's flak, and then there's, right. Commissioner Greenberg.
Bob, the projections here for the subsidies, they're based on the division of the budget, what they tell us?
We get projections, they really do budgets on a year-by-year basis, but we have conversations with them. So we are basically following prior guidance from them. But again, they do a budget on an annual basis, and so whatever we might have as future projections, it's not guaranteed.
No projections guaranteed. I just wonder what we base them on, because a lot of them, I just want to note that they're flat in petroleum business tax, MRT, and that may be very correct, and I think that's something to look at. Also, if you look at the TBTA revenue and how actually much less is going to operating over the years because of the debt, I think you could see why we do need an additional revenue source. It's just not that our expenses have ballooned or something else, that the MTA is wasting money, because that's what we're going to hear, and I don't want to see that in the press. We do need this extra because of the added debt for the capital need. It's a need, and we probably have been shifting that need for probably decades, even though we've been contributing a lot. And two, that our subsidies just aren't what they need to be, and a lot of them are being taken up by this debt. So I just wanted I concur with Commissioner Pally, but I just want to make sure it's clear that this additional money that we're seeking, and I think we all agree we want to see some extra revenue source, a dedicated revenue source to the MTA, is needed, and it's not because our costs have ballooned tremendously. It's because we're spending money on things we need to improve service, and that the revenues from the subsidies are flat. And we have increased costs like everybody else. We do give modest increases to our employees, and healthcare costs have gone up. I just want to make sure that's clear and stated. And on the other thing, I know I didn't want to say this at the transit meeting, but I noticed between you, Chairman, and Commissioner Weisbrot, there was a soliloquy about service. I must say I'm hoping to see some improvement in whatever indicators you want, whatever indicators anybody chooses. It doesn't matter to me, because I looked at all of them in transit, and I have not seen an increase in almost any of them on any line-by-line basis. If anything, there's been some decline, and that's disturbing to me. But I think when you start at one of these, I want to make sure it's clear, when you start on one of these programs, you have to give it at least several months to see a result. So I'm hoping that by January, we see some positive results in the line-by-line indicators, whether they're weight assessment or platform wait time or train wait time. I actually expect to see some result of that, because I think we're investing in meat and potatoes, and I hope that should show some results. Thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of good questions this morning. I just want to make some macro suggestions. Next month, we'll be meeting to vote on the 2018 budget, but with the blink of an eye, unfortunately, we'll be sitting here in November or December of 2018, ready to vote on the 2019 budget. I think there's a number of very important, but also very complex and complicated issues that takes time to delve into and figure out and come up with constructive solutions. Commissioner Pally just raised an important issue, whether it's accessibility, paratransit. I think it would be wise for us maybe to consider creating a working group to spend time looking at these issues and figuring out a long-term macro solution to this thing, rather than do tweaks or one-offs or be reactive when things get really, really bad. I also think we should consider creating working groups to really look at things such as our fare structure system. A lot of people have a lot of concerns, different points of view regarding the MTA fare system in general. And I think, it would, benefit us if we took the time over the next 6, 8, 10, 12 months to really look at this with staff and board members and see whether or not there are things that we would propose to really kind of restructure or overhaul our fare system to make it possibly more self-sustaining and more equitable. And the other area that I've raised a number of times that I am passionate about and really want to see it, and, you know, we have the talent here in Jano Lieber, and there's no one better than Scott Reckler and he on our board, and other people like Pat Foy and others here. I really believe we need to overhaul our contracting system. There is not enough competition in bidding on our capital program. We're giving out contracts to the same contractors over and over again. They know the system. I truly believe they're scamming the system, and we're getting ripped off. The riders are getting ripped off. The taxpayers are getting ripped off. The MTA is getting ripped off. They play these games with delay claims. I think there's a lot of ways in which we can overhaul, not tweak, the whole contracting process that would provide tremendous relief on the debt service side, on reducing our costs. There's not a simple solution to that. In part, the MTA has to get out of its own way because we make life miserable for contractors, so a lot of them don't want to even bid on things because the misery of dealing with the MTA outweighs bidding. So we need to create competition. We create competition, we're going to lower the costs. And you know, we're going to have to move down two paths, and the clock is ticking. One, it may require changes in state statutes, state law, and so we should figure what those are so we can go to Albany and try to get the legislature, when they go back into session in January, to consider making those kind of contracting procurement changes that could save the authority significant amount of money. And I also think we have to look at this from an internal perspective. I know Scott and Pat are looking at changes at the TIFIA law. That could be another profound way of providing a lot of relief to the MTA by encouraging the private sector to do a lot of the work instead of the MTA, and that takes financial pressure off of us, as well as, you know, pressure on the maintenance side as well as the capital side. So, you know, there's a number of complex and complicated issues that I think it takes time to come up with a smart solution and a smart plan to really fix these problems and try to make service and budget relief significantly better. And I think we need to start early so that we have the time to reach out to everybody, to get input and figure out and come back with some real constructive suggestions on how to really, you know, reform or overhaul these kinds of initiatives or issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry, I think I heard at least 3 working groups, if not 4. I will endeavor to do that. I am concerned about where we're going on the implementation of the ADA, and I said I would, at least, this is one of the incremental things, but report back in December, if no later than January, on where we are on those elevator issues. But you asked a much more broader question, and in my own words, you're really looking at, let's re-envision the way the MTA is structured and operates, and I appreciate more than you know the idea that, yeah, if we find something to go to the legislature, let's do that. Let's take advantage of the opportunity to say, look, we can be more efficient and more effective and less expensive if we did things a different way and whatever changes we need, both locally and at the state level. So I appreciate that. You have my word.
Chairman, I just wanted to echo some of that, and I know I've spoken to you about a working group that we've had some discussion on the capital side, and I think, you know, if we're going to ask the public to help us reinvest in our system, we have to reinvent how we do it, because we can't ask them to keep funding and then have more and more stories of the inefficiencies that are taking place and the stories how the private sector could do it so much cheaper. And I think, you know, Larry's 100% right that this is not going to be an easy process, and the sooner we can get started on it, the better, because I think that if we could have them parallel the process and have them meet when we're actually asking for more revenue, with a new plan of how we're going to invest that revenue, we're more likely to get a public that's susceptible and responsive to investing more in it. So I'd encourage us to start that process.
Will do. Yes. Oh, yes. Commissioner
Mr.
Myrtle.
Chairman, I think Commissioner Schwartz has picked up on this point, but let me stress it. We've had visitation after visitation for the past year from the disabled and those who want access. May I respectfully recommend that there be a separate working group on paratransit and accessibility, not just within the subway system, but throughout the system as a whole. It seems to me that working with the New York City Department of Transportation, its counterparts in the other counties that we serve, we ought to be able, with a working group, to deal with this issue. I recognize, and indeed statute provides, the methods of the areas where elevators can be added to trains. But it seems to me we need a working group to try and expand that area. And again, it may require legislation. So the sooner we start on it, the better off we'll be.
Understood. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any other comments on the financial plan? If not, let me put forward a motion to convene into executive session to discuss matters regarding collective bargaining agreements in accordance with New York State Public Offices Law. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we're in. Like I don't have enough fucking problems. Okay, we're back in session. The board approves certain matters relating to Metro North collective bargaining agreements. Now may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. See you in December.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Test. I started way to work. Thanks, my friend. Kevin, do me a favor. Put that sign down. Yo, listen, remove the notice. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you. How are you, sir? Good. How's everything? Pretty good, not bad. I ain't got no plan. I'm going to take vacation this winter, so the winter will be much shorter for me. You know, take a whole month out. Not bad. No, no. I'm gonna mute it. Tell him to mute it for now. Mute the audio microphone. Mute everything for now.
TV guy. You got me. Thank you. There we go. Okay. Before we start, I just, it's this time of the year where I think it's really important with the weather changing and all the rest that's going on. I want to play a little bit off of the see something, say something. And what I really want to talk about is if you see someone in need, say something. There are numerous things that we can do as New Yorkers, whether we see someone in the system or outside of the system. Take advantage of the mechanisms that the MTA has put in place to call so that we can help whoever, whether it's a person who's sick or someone who's sleeping on the train or anything like that, be able to do it. Now, we have the help point stations. The help point stations, we have almost 2,800 of them in the system right now, all throughout. For those of you who don't know how it works, there are two buttons. There's a green button and a red button. A red button is an emergency, which will go directly to 911. The green button is for 911 and 311, excuse me. The green button is for if you're on board and you want information about how you transfer from one line to another or anything related to while you're in the system. I think it is very, very important to be able to take advantage of seeing somebody and seeing someone. For those who are sleeping in the system or need shelter, we'd be more than happy to help them get to a shelter, get to an outreach center, do whatever it is we need to do to help them at this time of the year. So I do want to say, if you see something, say something. That's a very important point. But if you see someone in need, in any form of need, also say something. Take advantage of the fact. There's also, in addition to that, a telephone number. We have an arrangement with BRC, the Bowery Residence Center. You can call them. They will also come and help. They can be reached either by calling 311 on your cell phone, pushing the red button here, or calling 212-533-5151. I think it's really important as we go into the end of the year and the holiday season that we have that same spirit necessary, and we do help everyone out. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Alfonso.
Hi, Chairman.
Hello.
Hoping you could talk about Amtrak's new plan for Penn Station beginning in January. A couple things I was hoping you could cover. First, with the first plan last summer, you're very strong with your words against them. You said that they would have to pay for the cost of the MTA would accrue. Is that going to be the case this time around as well? And I also had to ask you when we might expect some details on LIR service schedules. And you touched on some things we probably won't see, the ferries, things like that. What are some things that we will see, including potentially the fare reductions that you saw over the summer?
So an important question. We're aware, we're doing everything we can working with Amtrak to avoid any displacement whatsoever. We're not talking about anywhere near the levels and numbers of what experienced this summer. That being said, we may be seeing, we always in January of every year, we do have schedule changes. So if we do something from a schedule change point of view, it'll come out in the normal course in December of what will happen. But we're only talking about less than a handful of different of trains that would either need to move earlier or move later. But we're nowhere near to decide what that is because we're still working with Amtrak. Given the extent of what this is, which is minimal in the scheme of things as to where we were, very similar to New Jersey Transit, which came out with their schedule. They're not providing any discounts. They're not providing any additional services. We will alter our schedule accordingly, and we'll come back once we finish our discussions with Amtrak. What Amtrak needs to do is very much needed. I mean, we had a problem last night on Track 1. They had a problem on Track 1, which caused delays for the Long Island Railroad. Hopefully, when all the work gets done, we won't have these types of delays. So that's the important part. We're going to do everything we can to help them finish as fast as possible. And I will note, much to my belief that I didn't think it'd be possible, they did come in ahead of schedule, and I very much appreciate that. And I have every reason in the world to believe the same thing will happen this time around.
Joe, in the financial presentation today, we saw that revenue is down, fare box revenue is down. Some of the real estate taxes that were forecast in July didn't come in. How concerned are you in particular about the fare box stuff? stuff. Ridership appears to be headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, ridership can go up and can go down. I mean, it's been going down all through 2016 into 17. And it's not, having been budget director of the city of New York, I've seen revenues and activity go up and go down over time. And I think this, we will plan accordingly. The finance people, Bob Fran, laid out a proposal today which more than balances our budget next year. And taking into account what's going on with ridership and what's going on overall with the general economy, where you don't like to see situations where it goes on a decline, but you always have to be prepared for it. I go back to what I said years ago when I was with the city. You plan for the worst, you hope for the best, and that's how you budget as well.
But do you see this as just a blip, or do you see people saying this service is...
I don't think people are not coming on the system because of any service-related issues at all. We're actually seeing, if you break the day out into 24-hour periods, we're not seeing a decline in rush hour. We're seeing a decline in between. We are seeing decline on the weekends when mostly it was tourists. I think this is more economically driven than it have anything to do with the service delivery. Anybody who says it's service delivery, there's no way to show that because we're showing ever-increasing numbers during rush hour periods, not so during non-rush hour periods when people are, getting to and from work or to and from school. So, I think it's the off-peak that's been problematic, and it's the weekends that have seen a decline.
Chairman, there's talk today about the need to find a new revenue source for the MTA. Obviously, the two sources, the two most talked about right now are obviously the mayor's fare fix, the millionaire's tax, and the governor's forthcoming congestion pricing plan. But even if the governor unveils a plan that every New York lawmaker loves, it would still take years to implement and then to see the revenue from that. How soon do you think we need to find a new revenue stream? Are either of those options the answer you need to solve the budget issues that were talked about today?
The financial plan, which Bob Fran just laid out, showed that we are balancing our budget in 2018 and 2019. We're starting to see revenue, problems in 20 and 21 with out-year gaps. So we do have a little bit of time and a little bit of flexibility, but I'm going to work closely with the legislature, as well as the various task forces that have been put together by the governor to try to get the revenues up as soon as possible. I fully understand that it's very difficult to get revenues. As soon as you say you want new additional revenue, it does take time to come in, and our budget takes that into account. Ooh, Dan Rivoli stole it from you.
I wanted to follow up on Andrew's question about the ridership. I mean, people work 24 hours. I mean, people have to commute at rush hour. But why doesn't the off-peak declines and the weekend declines bother you when those are working people too, or those are people who are just simply not taking trips at all?
I said it does. If it doesn't bother me, I'll change my words. But if I didn't say that, those are not my words. So I don't want to play into it. But what I will tell you is it doesn't surprise me at all, because it's been my experience that things go up and things go down. And this trend has been going on now for over a year. It's not something that just, you may have just become aware of it, but it's been like this for a while. And I do agree with you. People do work at different times. The bulk of the people, though, and the bulk of our traffic are during the peak periods in the morning and in the afternoon. There are tremendous demographic habits and socioeconomic habits that are changing. Some folks don't work 5 days a week any longer. They work 4 days a week. There are work-at-home provisions. The digital world has allowed people to stay at home. Folks like WeWorks are, renting space out when people need it, and when they don't need it, they only pay for it when they need it. Yeah, the world is changing, and it changes the way they use our system. That in no way, shape, or form changes what I need to do and we all need to do to make the system better. But I don't see any connection whatsoever between ridership and service delivery.
Given the current financial numbers and the falling ridership, do you think, is there any chance that we might have to see an earlier fare increase than 2019, or that possibly it might have to be higher than inflation, that 2% annual inflation?
No, absolutely not. I said it then. I think the report was fear-mongering of the worst type. We just put out a budget. The budget numbers had been shared with the staff of the Comptroller's office, fully knowing that we were projecting a balanced budget for 18 and 19 to suggest that we may need, the sky is falling approach. I mean, it's really unfortunate that this debate is going on now. It is unnecessary, and the numbers have shown it. There are no numbers that were shown to the Comptroller's office that would bear this out. You want to get your name in the newspaper, say something outrageous. That's what he did.
Speaking of outrageous, hello, Chairman.
Hello, Channel 11. How are you?
All right. Everything
Greg, how are
is
you?
rosy, right?
Right. Been touching any walls lately to see if they crumble? Okay.
It's good. The signals are being fixed. Delays are down.
Not enough, but down.
All right. So what's the next thing that you're working on?
At the board meeting, there were numerous tasks given to me by the board regarding putting together a task force relating to accessibility, both on the paratransit as well as elevators and escalators, about how to redo how we do contracts. Those are all things that we need to do to reinvent the MTA, which I think is a very important thing to do. Not going to do anything to diminish what we're doing on the subway action plan. We have to continue it. We're just starting. It's four and a half months into it. And we'll just continue to do more and more and more and focus. With the number one requirement being, what is it that we can do to help our customers? Can we get them there faster? Can we get them there in a more efficient way? Can we keep our costs down as much as possible? That's the mantra day in and day out around here.
How's your ride been from Brooklyn on the 1 train? Was it the 2 or the 3?
It is the 2 and the 3, and I don't get to ride it on the weekends because the tunnel is closed because of the work that's going on. So I have to take the 4 and the 5 on Saturday and Sunday, but that's okay. It's going fine.
Hi.
And the Clark Street elevators are in good shape.
In talking to some of your colleagues on the board over the past week, they seem to be confused about how many people you will be hiring under the action plan. And the numbers I've heard range from 1,400 to 2,700. And so I was wondering, do you know how many people you will be hiring under the action plan and how much that will cost? And then second part of my question is, given everything we've heard today about the financial strains on the MTA, and given that all of these new people you're hiring will put an increased and recurring stress on the agency, is it fiscally responsible to be hiring all of these people when you still don't have these additional, or even one of these additional sources of revenue coming down the pike?
So the first question is, the plan included the hiring of 2,700 people over a period of time. We've already hired about a little over 900 at this point, and we're going to continue to go down that path. Our budget numbers include the hiring of them, so you saw the budget balanced in calendar year 18 and calendar year 19, that they have been taken into account. And I think your words were, is it fiscally responsible or irresponsible? I'm not sure which word you used, but it doesn't matter. Was it fiscally responsible, for decisions made years ago to extend the intervals levels for maintenance, which has caused us to have the declines that we're having now? And that was in a result of a reduction of about, 2,700 to 3,000 workers. There's been a decline in that area. We need to build it back up for specific reasons so that our customers are able to get through the system without any delays. We will be as efficient as possible, but we will also be as effective as possible, and that is the minimized reduction in delays. Again, I refer you to the financial books. They're online. If you go into the MTA.info webpage, you can get all the documents that were provided to the board today. In there, you'll see the numbers include all of these heads. But more important, privately later, you're going to tell me who I'll ask you at least, you don't have to tell me, but who in the staff here doesn't know how many I'm going to hire? I'd like to talk to them.
I just wanted to come back to this declining ridership number. You seem very confident that it's not related to service, but you have jobs up 48,000, you have more people living here. It would seem, I'm just curious why you're so confident it's not service related as the ridership decline sort of corresponds with the declining service.
It doesn't necessarily go with the declining service. It started long before. And I do believe we do have more people employed, but I do, when you look at the numbers, both at the city level and at the state level, income tax receipts are down. There may be more people employed, but they don't appear to be making as much money as they used to make. And therefore, when you see numbers like that, it's indicative of the fact that people, while employed, might not be paying as much. Plus also, as I said, the socioeconomic changes that have happened. People aren't working for the man anymore. They're working for themselves. They've got different types of hours. And with that, they have a different approach. I've seen numbers go up and I've seen numbers go down, but I've not seen this directly related at all to service. I mean, when I see the volumes and the peak periods, that's something I focus on. I think, I haven't looked at numbers on how many people are coming here for vacations. I haven't looked at hotel occupancy because I've been busy doing other things. But if from a pure micro and macroeconomic point of view, there are a lot of things that affect the economy in the general New York metropolitan area.
Hi.
How are you?
So now that you confirmed to Mr. Mocker of Channel 11 that the sky is in fact not falling, is there any chance that you'll follow up on Mitch Palley's recommendation about suspending fare increases and toll increases in 19 and 21? Or are those locked in from here on out?
We will do everything we can. Look, no decisions have been made one way or the other. Commissioner Palley and I have spoken about this prior to the meeting, and obviously you heard his point of view at the meeting. My job statutorily is to balance the budget of the MTA. I'll have to do what's necessary. But right now, as Bob Fran laid out, we are still looking at a less than inflation increase in fare and tolls in 2019 overall. But, if the revenues come in sooner than later and we can not have the increase, that would be a good thing as well. Look, there was a grand pact that was made, when almost 10 years ago between then governor, then speaker, and then majority leader of the New York State Senate, where there would be fare and toll increases every year, on and on and on. And that's being brought into question now, and it's the right thing to do. Just because somebody says that 10 years ago, we should always evaluate what's the right thing to do. So I understand where Commissioner Palley's coming from, and in many ways, I'm sympathetic.
Hi.
Hello.
Common Cause New York sent a letter today to the New York State Authority's Budget Office to investigate your role as a registered lobbyist at NYU and the fact that you're the chairman of the MTA. Do you see any conflict of interest there?
Well, it's interesting. Thinking that this would possibly ever become an issue, when I accepted this position, had discussions with and communications and writing back and forth with Jacob, where, it's been determined that I am not an employee of the MTA. I'm a per diem. I'm like any other board member. I do have the right to do work in somewhere else, in this case, NYU Langone Medical Center. I have not lobbied since I've been in this job, though I'm not prohibited from it. I wish, was it Susan Lerner who did this?
Common Cause.
Common Cause. I've known Susan for a long time. I'm surprised. All she had to do was ask me. I'd provide her those letters. And I look forward to any investigation into something that I don't think is wrong, nor does Jacob think is wrong. But fully recognizing out of an abundance of caution that this issue could be raised, I made sure that it was ironclad and not a particular issue. All right, we're good. Thank you, guys.